Okay, let's unpack this. If you're involved in buying, selling, or implementing artificial intelligence in a large organization, the rules of the game,
Right.
they're changing, and I mean dramatically and fast. For years, the whole process for buying AI felt like the Wild West, right? What usually sealed the deal was, a compelling demo, some impressive benchmarks, and that classic line, everyone else is doing it.
That era is absolutely ending.
Mhm.
And it's ending for a really specific reason. AI is moving out of that sort of cool experimentation phase and becoming core operational infrastructure.
Right, it's not a toy anymore.
Exactly. It's now embedded in workflows that touch the most sensitive parts of a business. We're talking customer interaction, financial transactions, handling personal data, and maybe most importantly, protecting the company's reputation. When AI gets that integrated, you just can't buy hype anymore.
So for this deep dive, our mission is to explore this new governing principle that the smartest procurement teams are using. It's basically a complete firewall. The rule is no governance, no deal. And this isn't just, a new box to tick. It's a total philosophical shift in how organizations think about technology risk.
It really is. And it's fascinating because if you look at that old era, the sales were driven entirely by the promise of, exponential productivity gains. The focus was 100% on capability.
On what the model could do.
Precisely. And now the focus is squarely on control. What can't the model do? And crucially, what happens when it goes wrong?
I wonder, though, how did organizations get away with such casual adoption for so long? I think it goes back to the software buying habits of the last, 10 years?
Oh, for sure. The cloud.
Yeah, with cloud subscriptions, it became incredibly easy for staff to just sign up, experiment, and quietly integrate tools, that whole shadow IT phenomenon.
Yep. Long before the governance and compliance teams could even catch their breath.
They were off and running.
Exactly. But the risk profile of, say, a generative AI tool is fundamentally different from a standard SaaS subscription. If an employee signs up for some unapproved project management tool, the risk is pretty contained.
Okay.
But if they sign up for an unapproved AI translation service and start feeding it confidential HR files,
Oh, wow.
the exposure is immediate, it's massive, and it's almost impossible to claw back.
So that brings us right to the why. Why this procurement revolution now? I mean, procurement's always been about managing risk.
Right.
What's so different today versus, say, 5 years ago?
Well, it's not theoretical anymore. That initial phase of casual adoption has created real, visible costs. We have actual examples now of AI systems that were put into use and then started leaking sensitive data because nobody checked the vendor's data retention policies,
Which were probably, non-existent?
or just incredibly vague. We've also seen tools generating incorrect outputs, but, and this is the key part, doing it with such persuasive confidence that people just blindly trust the answer,
Leading to huge operational mistakes.
or financial ones. And then there's the bias risk.
Oh, that's a big one.
It's huge. If you're hiring AI or your loan approval AI has bias embedded in it, you're not just making bad business decisions. You are actively creating legal and reputational risk across the entire company.
And I imagine there are new security vulnerabilities, too. Things like prompt injection.
Prompt injection, model inversion, all of that. But I think the single biggest, most unique risk is the speed of change.
Okay, dig into that. What do you mean by speed of change?
Traditional software is pretty static. You can do an annual security review and you're mostly fine. AI systems are, well, they're living things. Vendors are constantly updating the underlying models, tweaking features, introducing new capabilities, sometimes daily.
And the customer has no idea what's changing under the hood.
Often not. Or they don't understand the downstream impact. So if I buy System A today, and 6 months from now the model is retrained on new data, my entire risk assessment from day one might be totally invalid.
That sounds like a continuous, untracked exposure.
It is. That's what the experts call model drift. The model's performance degrades or its behavior changes because the world changes or the vendor retrains it.
So a fraud detection model that worked last Tuesday.
Might completely miss a new type of fraud next month. Exactly. So procurement has to figure out how to govern a system that's a constantly moving target.
So governance isn't a one-time approval anymore. It's a continuous monitoring job.
It has to be. And you can see why the old procurement teams, who are used to static software licenses, are just completely overwhelmed.
And it's not just internal anxiety driving this, right? There's external pressure.
Oh, huge external pressure.
Yeah.
Regulators all over the world are raising their expectations. They're demanding transparency, auditability, clear accountability for automated decisions. You see it in all the proposed AI acts.
And if we connect that back to our premise, Procurement is the choke point.
It's where the rubber meets the road.
A regulation is just a concept until it hits a contract.
That's it. If a vendor can't contractually promise audit trails and accountability for how they handle data,
They don't get the deal.
they don't get the deal. That external pressure becomes an internal mandatory checklist overnight.
Okay, so we've established the why. The pressure is intense. Let's talk about the what.
Mm.
The sources say the biggest philosophical shift is that procurement is moving from asking, does it work, to a much deeper question, can we control it?
That is the essential pivot. AI is no longer being evaluated like a normal SaaS tool, which is pretty transactional.
You pay, you use the feature.
Right. AI is being evaluated like a system that could have legal consequences, a system that can influence high-impact decisions across the entire organization.
And I guess that's why the authority for buying it is changing hands.
Exactly. The innovation teams, the business units, they're focused on speed and capability. But they don't have the mandate for these high-stakes risk decisions.
But who does?
So now, AI is being bought by these risk-aware committees. The AI working group has to include people from legal, compliance, security, often the chief risk officer. It's not just the R&D team anymore.
That sounds like it would slow things down considerably.
It does.
So is governance now just table stakes? Or can it still be a competitive differentiator for vendors?
It's quickly becoming table stakes, yes. But the vendors who do it really well are absolutely differentiating themselves. If a vendor shows up on day one with a comprehensive, easy-to-digest compliance pack, it signals maturity. It signals competence. They get the enterprise risk. So buyers are basically using governance as a trust filter now. They want vendors who can answer some fundamental questions before a single line of code is integrated.
Okay, so what are those killer questions? The ones that can just shut down a sales conversation. Okay.
What specific data does it touch? PII, regulated data. And where? In what jurisdictions? What are the hard operational boundaries? For example, this AI is for internal document summaries only. It must never be used for final legal counsel.
And I imagine the biggest question of all.
What happens when it fails? Because it will fail. And the organization needs a clear, predefined off-ramp and a pathway for accountability. The era of the hand-waving aspirational sales deck is officially over.
Vendors need a detailed operational handbook now.
They absolutely do, and it has to be auditable, verifiable. The sources are really clear on this, saying, trust us, we're a good company, does not survive an incident review.
Right. Policy documents aren't enough.
Not even close. Buyers want controls they can see embedded in the product.
Okay, so this is the actionable part for everyone listening. If you're buying or building AI, you need to be ready to present or to demand this evidence. Let's go through the checklist. What's number one?
First is just clarity and scope. Buyers demand a clean AI inventory of features. Simple, unambiguous clarity on what it does, and just as important, what it doesn't do.
Okay, makes sense.
Second, a crystal clear description of the intended use. This is all about restricting the scope. If the buyer is only approved to use it for internal marketing copy, the vendor has to acknowledge that limitation.
Then we get into the data, which is where things got messy early on.
Yes. Number three. Incredibly detailed data flows and retention policies. How does data enter your system? Where is it processed? When is it purged? They need to know their data isn't secretly becoming your training data.
Right. And fourth would be security.
Specific, auditable security controls.
Right.
And this is more than just general data encryption. We're talking about access controls specific to the model itself. How do you prevent data exfiltration through clever prompting?
Okay, and fifth is accountability. This is where the tech meets the org chart, right? Human oversight mechanisms.
Yes, and this is a huge point of confusion.
Yeah.
Buyers need to know if the system is designed for human in the loop or HITL.
Where a human has to approve every single output.
Exactly. Mandatory for something like a major lending decision. Or is it human on the loop, HOTL, where the AI runs autonomously and only escalates exceptions?
Which is fine for lower stakes things like triaging support tickets.
Right. Procurement needs to know which model it is and how that human accountability is actually enforced.
That makes a huge difference. Okay, number 6 must be about forensics.
Detailed logging and audit trails. You can't investigate an incident without granular logs.
And what needs to be in those logs?
To be truly useful, the logs need to be forensic ready. That means capturing not just the prompt and the output, but critical metadata, the specific model version that was used, the confidence score the model assigned to its own answer, and ideally, which input features most influence the outcome. Without that, you can't trace a biased decision back to its cause.
Making the whole system legally indefensible.
Totally.
And finally, number 7.
Clear contractual incident response commitments. Mistakes are going to happen.
Yeah.
Buyers want to know, in the contract, what the vendor commits to doing on what timeline when a failure occurs.
So much tighter SLAs than for general software.
Much tighter and much more specific.
This shift in what's demanded, it has to be changing the power dynamics in the market.
It really is. The sources point out a huge risk for buyers. AI vendors can be intensely sticky.
Meaning hard to leave.
Very hard to leave. Once you embed a sophisticated model into your core business processes, with custom fine-tuning complex APIs, all of that, switching to a competitor is incredibly painful and expensive. It creates a massive lock-in risk.
So the buyer loses all their leverage after they sign. How are procurement teams fighting back against that?
They're not just accepting it. They are pushing much harder on contract terms before the ink is dry. They're focusing on 3 specific contractual safeguards. First, they want to ensure portability.
Portability of the model itself, how is that even possible?
It's a friction point for sure. They're not asking for the vendor's proprietary foundational model. They're insisting on portability for the customer's assets, the trained weights, the custom data sets, that kind of thing.
Okay, that makes more sense. What's the second safeguard?
Formal model change notifications. This means the vendor has to give advance warning of any update that might materially affect the model's output or performance.
Which gives the buyer's internal team time to revalidate the system before the change goes live.
Exactly. It's a direct challenge to that move fast and break things tech culture. But from a risk perspective, it's non-negotiable.
And the third?
And third, they're insisting on tight contractual safeguards to limit surprises. This can include warranties against performance metrics or clauses that link payments to actually following the promised security protocols.
So if you're a buyer listening to this, what's the one piece of advice you should take away?
Treat governance as a precondition, not as a phase 2 you'll get to later. Start every evaluation by getting internal alignment. Ask, where will this AI be used, and what's the absolute worst thing that could go wrong in that specific scenario?
And you have to stop business units from going rogue.
You have to. You have to prevent them from creating what the sources call untracked exposure.
That's a great phrase. Can you give an example of untracked exposure?
Sure. A business unit integrates a seemingly harmless AI tool, maybe an automatic summarization API, just for internal efficiency. Procurement never vetted it, so no one has visibility when that team starts feeding it highly confidential strategic plans or privileged client emails.
And now that data is in the hands of a third party you have no contract with.
And no control over. That's untracked exposure. It's a ticking time bomb.
Okay. And for the vendors listening, the message seems pretty blunt.
It is. You need a comprehensive compliance pack, just as much as you need a slick product deck. Transparency is not optional anymore.
You have to explain what you log, how you prevent misuse.
And how your customers can actually audit and troubleshoot the outcomes from your system.
And finally, what about those internal AI champions? The ones trying to drive adoption?
Their role has to change. Stop overselling speed and start designing trust. When procurement or compliance raises a concern, they aren't trying to block innovation. They're trying to avoid approving the system that causes the next headline.
Your job is to build a compliant pathway for your idea. This deep dive really does reinforce that main theme. AI buying is growing up. As AI moves from the lab into core operations, procurement is the new gatekeeper. And that gate is closing firmly on unsupported hype and unchecked risk. The new rule is simple. No governance, no deal.
And the ultimate conclusion from all the sources we looked at is that the organizations that win in this era will be the ones who can demonstrate control, not just capability. They're the ones who understand that transparency and trust are now part of the product.
And that leads to a final thought for you to take with you. If the power is shifting to the buyers because of that painful lock-in risk, and buyers are now demanding data and model portability, how might that requirement eventually change the whole competitive advantage of proprietary AI models? If true data portability becomes mandatory, what happens to the competitive moat that's been built on all that custom-trained data? Something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us.